Okay, and let's now talk about steaming milk. There are two main things that every barista really has to do well. Number one, you have to make good espresso. You got to know how to deal with it. Number two, you really have to know how to steam milk properly. You're not going to end up with latte art if you don't steam your milk properly, and your latte art won't really blend well with your steam milk. Even if you steam your milk really well, if your espresso doesn't come out all that great, then of course that doesn't really make the best drink. So steaming milk is really, really critical. It definitely takes some practice. It's actually easy to practice without using milk. You can YouTube some videos. If you YouTube barista milk steaming practice with soap and water, there's actually some great tutorials how to do that without wasting milk. But in general, steaming milk is really important. You want to start with cold milk. Milk needs to be between 32 and 40 degrees, and you want a cold steaming pitcher. In best case scenario, milk is added to the steaming pitcher based off volume. So milk increases 30 to 50% in volume when you steam it properly. So you have to think about, let's say somebody orders a 12 ounce latte. You know, out of that 12 ounce cup, based off of making espresso, that espresso is going to take, let's say, 3 ounces out of that. So now you have 9 ounces left of space. So you do not want to steam 9 ounces of milk in order to make a 12 ounce latte. Milk increases in volume when you steam it, 30 to 50%. So to make 9 ounces of finished product, you're steaming about, let's say, 6-ish ounces of actual cold milk. So whenever you make one drink, you want to measure the amount of milk that you need for that drink. It then pours into the steaming pitcher, and then you can steam it from there. The ideal temperature to steam your milk to is about 155 degrees. You never want to exceed 160 degrees, and it's really critical that a barista uses a properly adjusted milk steaming thermometer in their steaming pitchers. It doesn't really matter if you're a really advanced barista and you use the hand technique and you can tell. Of course, we can't be incredibly accurate, even as practiced as some people can get. So it's really important that we use a thermometer and that we are attaining the right temperature while we're milk steaming. So when we steam our milk, we want to go from basically 35 degrees up to about 155. If somebody wants milk hotter, so somebody might say, can I get that extra hot? Then it's okay to usually steam it to about 170, but you don't want to go over 170. Once you get to about the 180 range in temperature, you're going to start scalding your milk, and it really affects the flavor of a beverage. If you accidentally oversteam milk and you scald it, it will completely ruin many beverages moving forward. So you got to be real careful about your temperatures. But from a drinkability standpoint and a quality standpoint, you want to use a thermometer. You want to turn your steaming off when it registers about 145 on the thermometer. Because of temperature lag, it'll go up to about 155-ish. And again, you don't want to go over 160. So how do we steam milk? There's some really good YouTube tutorials about this. We'll try to have some links in this video. If this is on YouTube and you're watching this on YouTube, that you can go to that will help visually see this. Obviously, this is just a verbal explanation of what we do. But in general, the proper amount of milk goes in a cold steaming pitcher. The nozzle then goes below the surface of the milk, away from the edges and the bottom of the pitcher. It's really critical that your steam wand tip is not near the bottom or the edge of the pitcher. That pitcher is stainless steel. Anywhere close to that bottom or the sides of the pitcher will superheat, and that's what causes a lot of scalding. So it's really important that you put it in the right spot. You always then want to turn the steam wand on full pressure. New baristas get a little afraid of this in the beginning, but always just full on. As long as you have that tip into the milk far enough, you're not going to spray anything everywhere. You just got to get used to how to do that. Steaming milk happens in two waves. Basically, you're steaming milk from about 35 degrees up to 100 degrees first. So what you're doing during that time, and while you're sitting there and adjusting, you're basically denaturing the milk. The heat that's being introduced into the milk causes the fats and proteins and sugars to basically pop, let's say. And so the sugars open up. Okay, we talked a little bit about shooting the milk earlier, but what's happening is the milk, all those fats and sugars basically, pop, and they start reforming and attaching to each other to develop air bubbles. You're shooting steam into the milk. You're shooting air into the milk. You're shooting hot air basically, and you're causing bubbles to form. All of that happens up to about 100 degrees. Once you reach 100 degrees, you're done with that. The milk is done. There's no more fats. The proteins, they're all denatured. And from 100 degrees then up to about 155, all that's happening is all those bubbles are hitting each other and just breaking up and causing smaller bubbles to form. So between 100 degrees and 155 degrees, you're basically just creating what we call silk. Once you turn off the steam one at 155 degrees, then you want the milk to literally look almost like silk. It'll be very, very fine bubbles. There might be a few larger bubbles depending on the type of milk and whether you're making a cappuccino or not. But in general, for like a general latte, you want the top of that milk to look completely silken. You can tap the pitcher a little bit to pop the larger bubbles. But in general, right away, that milk should be ready to go. So again, there's two main steps in forming milk foam. 35 degrees to 100 is where all the magic happens, and then 100 to 155, all you're doing is creating bubbles, smaller bubbles, and of course getting it up to drinking temperature. When you then want to pour your steamed milk into your espresso, as a barista, you time your espresso making with your steamed milk production, so they time and end at the same time. If you produce milk, if you steam milk and you do the perfect job, and then you set it down and let it sit, immediately the heavier milk that's steamed starts going to the bottom of your steaming pitcher, and the foam that you've created starts going to the top of your pitcher and starts to float. So you want to be able to have your espresso ready to go and fresh, so that when you're done steaming your milk, you can tap it a few times on the table, and then you go right into pouring into your espresso. The technique to do latte art, then we won't explain in this video, but if you do that properly, then you should be fine. If you let your steamed milk sit on the counter too long, then what happens is you go to pour your steamed milk into your espresso, and two things happen. Either just steamed milk goes in, and you raise your espresso in the cup, and there's no foam, so you're just not going to get a good latte, or your foam actually immediately covers up your espresso at the bottom of the cup. If that ever happens, that means that you've created milk, steamed milk, that is too foam heavy, and it's separated in the steaming pitcher. So you've let it sit too long. Typically then you can take the steaming pitcher, if you notice it and you go, oh crap, I screwed up here. And you can take the steaming pitcher and twirl, right? Like, so you do something like this, and you twirl the espresso around, or you twirl the steamed milk back basically into the foam, and do your best to reincorporate those together so that you can make a proper drink.